Hi, my name is John. I'm a physical therapist and a bike fitter, and I'm going to take you through my process that I use for my bike fit. Bike fits usually start right here on this treatment table. And it's not really a treatment table, it's just a portable massage table, but gets the job done. And initially the main thing is I like to just have a conversation with my clients and interview them a little bit to figure out what kind of rider they are, where they like to ride, other activities they do, any injuries they've had, what they do for a living, because that can play into how they're going to fit on their bike or any issues we may find later on. So sometimes it may be a fairly brief conversation, other times more in depth. After the interview, we do a physical assessment, and this really stems from my background as a physical therapist. I like to try and get an idea for how the person moves off the bike. How they move off the bike can relate to how they move on the bike. It doesn't always translate, but when you have a good idea of what's going on off the bike and you can correlate that, it really gives you a better foundation for some of the decisions you make and the changes you make down the road to their fit. The physical assessment will include some basic range of motion and strength testing, a functional movement screening of sorts. Basically kind of I always call it like a quick PT eval, just to get a baseline for how the person moved. After we do the physical assessment, then it's time to get the person up on the bike. We hook them up on a trainer. Initially, I like to let people just spin for a little while. I don't let people warm up too much. I like to see them cold a little bit because it helps to really bring out some of the deviations in their pedal stroke and also some of their mechanics. I like to watch people pedal for a few minutes, even though we're going to have the infrared motion capture system kind of do all the measuring for us and data processing that way. I still like to watch people pedal. It kind of goes back to my background as a physical therapist. I like to be able to see how somebody is moving, and it helps me improve my skills just a little bit because I can try and make an educated decision on how they're moving, and then the infrared is accurate enough where it will tell me whether I was thinking correctly about it. Once we're done with the visual assessment, then I can go ahead and hook up the infrared harness to the rider. It consists of 8 LEDs that affix to 8 different joints on one side of the body. The infrared harness is made by a company that's well known. It's called retool.com, and they're out of Boulder, Colorado, and you can look more up about them, of course. Placing the infrared markers is really important. We want to make sure we hit very specific anatomical landmarks so that we get good data. Once the rider is hooked up, then we can begin recording. And the infrared is great because in just a couple of minutes, we'll get literally thousands of complete measurements of their body. The best part about the measurements we do get is that they're dynamic. They're measurements of the rider while they're pedaling, so we don't have to have the rider stop so we can take measurements somewhere or assess something. Each side gets tested, the right and the left side, so we have full visualization of the body as the rider pedals. And we get a lot of good information in being able to compare right to left movement. Right along with that, with assessing the right to left movement, we also see a lot of right to left deviations where one side is doing something different than the other side. Once we're done gathering information from the infrared system, then it's time to move on to the toughest part, which is the interpretation. The interpretation really consists of taking all the information, all the data we've accumulated up to this point, from the interview to the off the bike physical assessment and functional tests that we did off the bike, the on the bike visual assessment, and then finally the infrared assessment on the bike. We have to take all this information, we have to make some decisions about why someone has back pain on the bike, or why their knee is deviating to one side, or why they don't sit square on the bike. And we'll see a lot of differences right to left. We'll see the infrared will give us a whole bunch of deviations right to left. I determine what changes we need to make, and we go ahead and make those changes. It might mean swapping somebody's stem out. It may mean changing the fore-aft position on the bike. We can change, and we often do change to varying degrees, every contact point that the rider has, from handlebars to the saddle to their cleat positioning as well. Knowing when not to change something is often the toughest part. And following up on that, sometimes knowing when a change to the bike isn't really going to help the situation. That's really important to understand. And when that is the case, when maybe a bike change isn't going to solve the problem, knowing what sort of treatment can be implemented to remedy the situation off the bike. That would be very helpful for that client, of course. The great thing about the infrared system is that once we do make changes, we can very easily and quickly retest. So we can see if the data is going in the right direction. You really have to have an idea of, again, of what you're looking at so you know when somebody is improving. But the nice thing is we can make changes and retest, make sure we're going in the right direction, and we can keep going back and forth with this a couple of times. We can make additional changes and retest to really make sure that we're creeping up on that optimal bike fit. Speaking of optimal bike fit, truthfully, rarely if ever on that very first day, on that initial bike fit, do we see someone improve 100% and get to what we would consider a perfectly neutral posture. Sometimes a person will never get to 100% neutral. But what we are looking for on that first day often is about a 30 to 40% improvement in that infrared data. So it's improving maybe a third of the way or more towards that neutral position that we're looking for. The reason for this is that our soft tissue really requires some time to adapt to the new position. Even when we make small changes, soft tissues throughout the body, from the fascia supporting the cervical spine to the muscle cells in the calf muscles, really have to be given some time to adapt to their new position, their new posture, and their new work, their new work cycle. Some neurological changes have to take place as well. Since some of these soft tissues are now working in a different manner, our central nervous system, basically our brain, has to develop a new motor plan to control all these tissues in their new movement sequence. As you might imagine, smaller changes often require a little less time to be absorbed, while bigger changes will require more time, perhaps up to even a couple of months to adapt to the new position. I see this phenomenon in pretty much every bike fit I do. We'll finish up with the bike fit and take a final set of infrared measurements that show where the position is, or where the person is positioned. And then the person will not change a thing after that point, and they'll go ride. Sometimes it's for a couple weeks, sometimes it's for a couple of months. And when they come back, even though they have not changed anything about their bike, they will be positioned differently on that bike when they come back. And if I've done my job right, and I've gotten them moving in the right direction on that first fit, then they usually come back and they're anywhere in the range of 70 to 90% closer to that neutral position that we're talking about. That's the basic rundown of my bike fit process. It's one I've kind of developed over the years, and it really stems a lot from my training as a physical therapist. It models very similarly how I would do a physical therapy evaluation. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments down below. I'll include a link to my website in the description also, and you can contact me there. Plan to hopefully post videos on a pretty regular basis, hopefully once a week, maybe a little bit less than that, but on bike fit especially, and also just some bike related videos. So hit the subscribe button and keep up. Thanks.